Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear friends. Welcome to this second session of Quran with Teens. Hopefully, inshallah, it will be a fruitful one. And once again, we will read a certain portion of the Quran. And the purpose of this reading, obviously, is that you're able to understand that particular portion. And the portion that we are actually going to read and discuss today is a very fundamental text that we all, almost all of us, know it by heart, and we often recite it. I mean, it's not just often; it's every time that we say the prayer, we recite this portion in almost every rakat of the Quran of the prayer. So let's start off with Surah Fatiha, and as I said, uh, as you would be memorizing or you had already memorized this portion, it's essential that you also understand certain points which come up in this Quranic surah because it is of fundamental importance as far as our own understanding of the Quran is concerned. So, what I've done here is that you can see the text of the surah being displayed before you, and just let me. Okay, so it's like you can see the verses, the 6 verses of this surah, right in front of you, and they are each of the lines represent one verse. And when you go ahead, you can just see in the next pages. I'm sure you must be having one of these PDF files with yourself as well. So you can write on your computers, or you can pick up a pencil or a pen and write it on a sheet of paper. So the purpose is that you have a literal meaning of each of the words of this surah. It's a literal meaning, and you need to connect these words to make it a meaningful sentence for the complete surah. So you'll get, when you write this translation, you'll get a jumbled sort of a thing in which words would not be very cogent in the English language. So you just have to add a few words to make it understandable and comprehensible. So I think this is something that you can do very easily. As you can see, I'm sharing each of these verses. These are 6 verses, and each of them has been literally translated, or the meaning of each individual word of a verse has been presented right in front as a literal meaning of that particular word. So the first thing that I need you to do, and which I have actually included as a comprehension question, is that you please write down the translation of the complete surah by taking help from this key, and let's see what you come up with. So begin now, please. So I'm sure you must be having these lines with you. So if you feel any difficulty or you need to ask any question, you're always welcome. But I think it's pretty simple. So let me start off with some of you who have already finished. Sine, can you please go ahead with your translation? How did you translate this surah?
For the first one, I said, gratitude be to God, the Lord of our universe. He is most gracious, ever merciful. Should I continue?
Yeah.
Okay. He is master of the day of judgment. We worship only you, and to only you we ask for help. Please guide us on the straight path. Guide us on the path of those who you blessed, and not those who have angered you, and those who are astray.
That's wonderful. That is very good. So let me ask Ahmed Mujtaba.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
My translation is gratitude for God, the Lord of the universe, the most gracious, ever merciful, the master of the day of judgment. Only you we worship, and only you we ask help. Guide us on the straight path, the path of those who you blessed, not those you are angry on, and not those that are astray.
Oh, that's very good. Okay, next up is Maria Iqbal. Would you share your translation?
Okay. Gratitude for God, who is the Lord of the universe. He is the most gracious and ever merciful. He is the master of the day of judgment. Only you we worship, and only you we ask for help. Guide us to the straight path. Show us the path of who you bless, not the angered upon, and not the astray.
That's very good. And now I'll ask Ali. Ali?
Gratitude for God, Lord of the universe, most gracious, most merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment. Only you we worship and only you we ask help. Guide us to the straight path. Guide to the straight path that whom you've blessed, not those angry upon, and not the astray.
So, guide us to the straight path, and then what?
Guide those to the straight path whom you've blessed, not those angered upon.
So you see, you need to add some more words to make sense. So, guide us to the straight path, the path of those that you have blessed. Okay, the path that you have, the people that you have blessed, not of those who have angered you, or neither of those who have gone astray. So basically, it's asserting a positive thing, that the people that you have blessed, we would like to follow them and their path, and not of those who have angered God, neither those who have gone astray. Okay, any one of you who could volunteer to read the Arabic of this surah, because I'm sure all of you know the Arabic because you read it in your prayers. So can I have a volunteer who would like to read the Arabic part?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
So, Jazakallah, that's wonderful. Okay, folks, now we go on to the next comprehension question, which you can see in your files. Ms. Ghazal, could you just read out this question?
Give 5 good reasons to be grateful to God.
So I think that this should not take very long. Just think of 5 extremely good reasons which make you really, really thankful that someone is caring about you. And I'll just ask at random. So Ariba and Fatima, what do you think are 5 very good reasons for thanking God?
He made us humans. He is the Lord of the universe. He controls natural phenomena like.
Remember, you have to present something which is beneficial to you. So something direct. Of course, the universe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So giving us parents, giving us a house, letting us have the education. Giving us loyal friends.
Right.
And food on our tables. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
I mean, there's more, but...
Yeah, of course. These are 5 very good reasons. Can I ask Sana Ahmed? So what are the 5 good reasons to you for which we should be grateful to God?
For giving good health. And for giving us food and good education, good parents.
Pick anything. There's so much to thank God about.
For giving us good friends.
Okay. So you've pointed out one very important thing, and that is good health. And people often forget because they take it for granted. Whenever we are sick, we just realize how big a blessing our health is. So you see, all these things, they entail that we should continue to thank God. And this is also a remedy to a lot of things that go on in our life, specifically and particularly things which make us depressed, which disappoint us in life. So every time that you feel disappointed in life, every time that you feel down and out, just try to imagine these blessings that a normal body that you have, and as most of you have said, good parents, good education, a good environment. So this is something which is really, these are blessings that we often take for granted, and I think that we need to count them. We need to have a good track of them. So you see, there are so many things which we take for granted, as I just pointed out. Look at the fact that we are breathing without any intention to breathe. It's like an automatic process. And we take breathing for granted. And I had an aunt who died of lung cancer, and she had to take every breath near the end of her life by willfully actually exerting pressure and drawing deep breaths. It was no longer a voluntary process, involuntary process. It became a voluntary process for every breath, because you see, in lung cancer, what happens is the space in your lungs gets infected, and you are on oxygen, and sometime after that, even the oxygen stops working, and you have to, take your breaths every time that you to take a breath. It's like torture for you, because you see, imagine yourself drawing breaths out of your own volition, out of your own intention, because this is a process that goes on involuntarily. So, we don't take it for granted, we don't think of it, but this breath which is coming out from a machine, which is going to never stop unless, of course, we pass away, which is called heart, is something which keeps on pumping and pumping and pumping. It doesn't need any batteries, doesn't have any backup, but it goes on and on. So think of these things, and then of course think that you have a normal body. You see, the handicap which people suffer, one of the worst handicaps which people can have, is being blind and not being able to see. And imagine the people who around you who are not able to see, and they are people of all ages, and to test yourself as a person how valuable eyes are. Just shut your eyes and start about going your routine in life, and you will get, so frustrated how important eyes are, and how we actually tend to forget them, that they are a blessing of God. So a normal human body, the fact that, as small a thing as forgetfulness. You see, if forgetfulness is something which is a bad thing. You not forget your commitments, but there is one area in which forgetfulness is a blessing, and that is that you forget your agony and pain uh, over a period of time. Maybe the loss of a dear departed would have really caused severe anguish, but as time passes, this forgetfulness takes the better of us. As they say, time is the best healer, and this forgetfulness, which is normally a flaw, it becomes a very it's a benefit for us, because we tend to forget our worries as we go along them, and the biggest of tragedies which have struck us, we tend to overcome them. So forgetfulness is a big boon. Sleeping at night getting up with a good sleep is again something which most of you should take as a big thing, a big plus thing, because I know so many people, even in young ages, that they are not able to sleep properly. They have sleeping problems. There are a couple of insomniacs. They have extreme difficulties in spite of taking medicine to go off to sleep. And sleep is something which comes so naturally to most of us. So take it as a big blessing. So it's like the Quran at one place has said that if you start counting the blessings of God, you will not be able to count them. They'll outrun you, and you'll just think that whatever I have, whatever surroundings I'm living in, everything, my normal body, my parents, my surroundings, the food that I have. Look at the people who are deprived of food, and they don't have food for the next day, and they have to work hard for that, and at times they have to go back to their homes without having any food, particularly people who are on daily wages. So you see, there's a lot of things to thank God, and lo and behold, this is the very first word of the Quran. Alhamd. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. This is the first verse of the Quran, and Alhamd is the first word of the Quran, which tells us how important gratitude is. So remember, you have to be grateful. Always count your blessings. Forget about your deprivations, because the blessings that you have, if you start counting them, they're going to outnumber your deprivations. Okay, thank you very much for that. So, folks, we go on to the next part of our comprehension questions. And as far as I remember, the third question is that we just read in Surah Al-Fatihah that God is most gracious and most merciful. Most of you have just translated this verse as a person who is taking care of everyone. Of course, Rahman and Rahim are two attributes which stand out, which show how merciful God is. So my question to you would be that why is there misery in this world if we think that God is so merciful? God himself claims in the Quran, it's not just here, but you'll find these attributes of Rahman and Rahim dispersed all over in the Quran. And perhaps it's the most mentioned attributes, one of the most mentioned attributes. So the simple question is, why so much misery? Why so much pain? And here I'll wait for a volunteer to answer the question. Remember, this was a very basic question in the life of the famous philosopher and sage and the founder of a religion, Buddha. So he actually founded a new religion, and one of the reasons, or I could say the basic reason in this, was that he said that there's so much misery in this world that we need to forsake this world, just abandon it and just go out of these so many things that we take for granted, and all these things, they obstruct your vision from the Creator. You get so entangled in with them, you get so involved with them, and at the same time you see so much misery. You see earthquakes, you see tsunamis, you see floods ravaging through, and then you have deaths of young children, you have people who are, I mean, just child molestations, which is such a heinous thing. So all these things made him think, and he simply abandoned the world, and he founded a very powerful religion, and which is still it has a huge impact all over the world, not only from its place of origin, but in the US, in Canada, in Australia, because of the fact that Buddhism is a religion which teaches you how to conquer your desires, how to make sense of these miseries. So this is just a small diversion. But anyway, my question to you would be, just make an educated guess. You don't have to come up with the right answer. That's not an expected thing. Why do you think there is misery? Because this is, of course, not in conformity with the attributes of mercy and graciousness of the Almighty.
I think the world is full of misery because it is a test that tests our faith and our ability to go through harsh events and our gratefulness.
So you think that this misery has been left there by God Himself so as to test us? Do you think that this is the reason for these miseries is that this world has an aspect which we need to understand, and that is because God wants to try us through various means, and one of these means is that He tests us through miseries. But then what about if we are able to remain steadfast in these miseries? So how would you say that how would you reconcile the fact that if this world has a lot of pain and a lot of suffering, then how is God going to compensate these sufferings and these pains and anguishes?
I feel like it goes towards Day of Judgment.
Okay. So it's basically the Day of Judgment which is going to compensate for that. And people who had been in severe problem or in severe bother in this world, what about if these people had who were actually had those tough circumstances? They were also people who were, let's suppose, they were great sinners. I mean, how would you say that if a person is a sinner in this world, he is really sinning in this world, and would he still be compensated in the next world?
I don't know.
Okay, that's a fair answer. We'll try to answer that again. Okay, do we have anyone else who would like to express an opinion regarding the miseries that we face in this world?
If there was no misery, there would also be no implication of mercifulness. So perhaps like the reason of misery is so we can gauge the mercifulness of Allah.
But Sine, don't you think that this is way beyond human capacity, the miseries that we face? At times, small children, they get burnt up. I remember many years ago, this is something which is a real instance of happening in Canada. Many years ago, I mean, it's not that far ago, it's about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a huge bushfire, the ones that you see today in Australia and in California. So one time this happened in Canada as well, and almost all the animal population was burnt to death. It was just wiped out. And they found, the people there who were searching for animals, they found one small deer, maybe a couple of months old, and that deer was half burnt. One part of his was okay, and the other part was totally burnt. But he survived, and so they took him to a hospital. They tried to care for him, but it happened that after 1 month of severe struggle for life, he too passed away. And the next day, one of the Canadian tabloids newspapers ran this heading which said, "Is God dead?" which actually meant that where is God's mercy? I mean, is to be cruel or just to present the way people think about God. If some cruelty happens to human beings, okay, that may be understandable because they could be compensated. But what about these animals and the way they at times die? As I just gave you a real-time example. So, what the point that I'm making, Sine, here is that at times the test or the misery simply seems far beyond the fact that unless you know misery, as you said, you just cannot have a good comprehension of God's blessings. So, do you think that's reason enough?
Well, it would be very difficult for humans to understand their own limitations, and only Allah can gauge what limitations, and if they are passed, He is guaranteed compensation in the afterlife.
Okay.
So I guess you'd have to have faith in that, yeah.
Right. So you say that basically this is a whole matter of compensation, but that question still remains unanswered. That okay, people who are good in this world and they suffered, they would be compensated. That's very logical and that's understandable. But what about people who are bad here and they suffered a lot in this world for various reasons? Would they also be compensated?
I mean, I don't know, but perhaps they would be compensated for the things that they were that. I think there would like be a balancing scale. So if they did a certain like number of bad deeds, but like their number of like good deeds, like triumph, like they would be compensated to the extent of which they did bad things.
Okay, so you see, what you're trying to say is that the amount of bad deed that they did, or the bad deeds that they did, for that, if that accounted for their sins, till that they will be punished, but beyond that, maybe they will be rewarded. So that justice still is meted out. Is that what you're saying?
I think so.
Okay, that's fair enough. And anyone else who'd like to express an opinion regarding these miseries that we face in this world, and it almost at times makes us lose sight of God, because, as I said, many people think that this is some cruelty from God, and he should have adopted some different method.
It's a sign of Allah's mercifulness that not all of us have to go through the same misery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an example to us who don't have to suffer as much as other people in the world, that God is merciful and that we should be thankful and give all of our gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we, keep our faith in Allah, we will be saved from these sort of miseries in this world and the next.
So Zoya, what do you think if you talk to a Buddhist or a person who is an atheist, and one of the biggest reasons for people becoming atheists or losing sight of God is this phenomenal question of misery, because you see there are so many people who don't believe in the hereafter, and to them this world becomes an enigma and a mystery. So how would you think that people, such people who maybe have a different view regarding a hereafter, how would you try to convince them, or maybe think of anything that comes to your mind to initiate a conversation if the other person also is interested, that how would you address this problem, that people who just rely on this world and they are told that God is merciful, and they make fun of this statement by saying that how can God be merciful, because they don't have any concept of the hereafter. So is there any way to probe them or to ask them or to discuss with them?
I think the best way is, especially as someone who is a Muslim, would be to try to direct them towards the Quran and show them examples that you see there and explain to them the history of the Quran, where you can see so many stories of God being merciful in a situation that He has made that should inflict much misery. So we have I think one of the biggest examples is the story of Prophet Noah, with the flood, where it caused so much misery, but because of the believers' faith, and their trust in the Prophet and Allah, as well as teaching them the history of the Quran and how it has been unchanged and how it is the word of God for us.
Okay.
Would be a good way to show them how there's a difference between the mercifulness and the misery.
So you say that basically you have to show the other side of God as well. If there are these problems and these turmoils and these things which cause so much consternation, At the same time, we have so many examples of God's mercy in which there are miracle stories, in fact, in which at times people survive a fire, they survive earthquakes, they survive impossible situations. So perhaps that could be one reason in which you could tell people that, okay, it's not all misery, there are some good aspects as well. And maybe this is just the right place to tell them that if you don't believe in the hereafter, you'll never be able to make sense of this world as well, and never be able to make sense of this partial misery and partial aspect of benefit to mankind. So if at the same time the world is or this world is exhibiting goodness, like you said, you see the blessings of the sun, the moon, the people around you, your parents, and on the other hand you see these terrorists or these other things which you are really dismayed. So we have both these things going on in parallel, and maybe this is also the time that you can maybe ask or tell the person in question that if there is so much misery, and in spite of this misery we have God's blessings, then maybe you're missing out on something. And if God is just, and if God is going to show this justice as He partially does in this world, so maybe there is another world in which we have to be held accountable, and God will going to to compensate us regarding some of our misery. So maybe this actually is an opening, and I think you've done a very good thing, Zoya, by pointing this out, that even in this world, in spite of misery, we have so many positive things, and that is the right way to address such people, and then try to maybe introduce them to the true concept of God and the hereafter. So thank you very much for that, Zoya. That's wonderful. So anyone else?
I wanted to say that sometimes I think that misery actually brings one closer to God. Sometimes like people feel so alone, or they don't know what else to do, but instead they actually have the blessing to pray to Allah and ask for forgiveness or ask for help, and that actually sometimes helps them get through misery or any sort of hardship.
So that's a good point that you have raised. Vis-a-vis the fact that one explanation of misery is that it brings you closer to God, it makes you stronger from inside, and it makes you a person who is better than before. But you see, this is perhaps not the complete answer, because you see there are people who at times they die of this misery. I mean, they are crushed under the wheels of a moving train, or there is a plane crash in which innocent people are killed. So you see, as far as bringing people closer to God is concerned, that can only happen when the person has survived. So that particular answer would answer that partial situation. But what about the fact when, people just don't survive? How would you explain that?
I don't have an explanation for
Okay, that is fine. That's a fair answer. You see, all this shows, I think it's a very good input from all of you, that all of you are thinking individuals, and you see the purpose of these sessions is to incite in you these questions. And even if you're not able to answer them today, that doesn't matter. Your clock of your mind should start ticking, and some of the questions that we have just discussed here, they should still remain in your mind if you've not got a convincing answer. And imagine yourself that if you do this discussion with a younger sibling or a friend, how would you go about doing it? So I think this is like embarking on a fresh journey, trying to find out the answers. It's not necessary that all the answers are given today or you have those answers. I have so many questions in my mind as well, for which I'm searching for answers. So it's not at all a problem if we don't have the correct answer. It's just the fact that we must turn on the switch in which whenever there is a question, we should actually try to simulate it in our minds and try to think or ask other people how such questions should be answered. So thank you very much for that, Mahin, or was it Samin? So okay, now let's move on to the fourth question, dear friends, and that question is that we just read in the Quran in Surah Al-Fatihah, which was verse 4, which said that we seek only God's help. So we said, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Nasta'in means that we seek your help, O God. So my simple question here would be that this verse seemingly says that you should only seek God's help. So if we are in some need or we are in some problem, if we start asking for help from some of our friends or maybe our parents or anyone who can help, wouldn't that be against what this verse says? Because this verse clearly says that we will only ask you, O God.
I think when you ask a friend for help, Allah has provided you with the friend. So if you're asking Allah for help, usually He will give you a route in order to do better or find a way. So Allah has provided you with these friends or family that are there to give you more assistance in this world. Since there's only so much of a way for Him to get involved. And so through the people that you have connections with, He gives you.
So Zoya, what the point that you're making here is that basically God helps at times directly, but many a time through other people. So when you are asking a friend for your help, for any help, it's not that you're crossing God. It is exactly the same thing that God has provided you with an opportunity that you can seek God's help. And one of the reasons or one of the means of seeking this help is that God Himself has provided someone who can help you out. So is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have any other person who has a different view or maybe something which he or she can add?
I think we would not be going against the verse 4 because God is sending that friend for you to help you and find a way to solve your problem. So I don't think we are going against verse 4.
Okay, so it's also there is another thing that we get to know as we read the Quran more deeply, as you would inshallah in future as well, that you see one of the ways in which God provides help is that He wants us to do what we can do first, and then we seek His help through the prayer, through making dua, supplicating before Him. So it would be much like a person who has not sown the seeds in his farmyard or in his backyard, and he's praying that God give me a good crop because I ask help from you, and therefore you are the best of providers, and please provide me that crop. But that's not going to happen, because unless you do your part, which is of course that you have to sow the seeds, or it's like the person who says that God please give me success in this exam, and if you have prepared nothing at all, it might be by fluke that you still pass, but more often than not, if you've not done what you were required to do, that was prepare for the exam, do your best and leave the rest to God, that would again not happen. So you see, seeking God's help again is something, as you rightly said, it's conditional to what we can do ourselves, because if we have someone who can help us, it is in line with the fact that it is God who has provided that person to us. So what the lesson that teaches to us is what I was just referring to, that every help that we seek from God should be sought from Him once we have done our part. So if we have not done our part and we start praying to God and start asking for His help, it would be just like a person, like a farmer who has not sown the seeds, or maybe not, he has sown the seeds but he's not taken proper care of the plant that is going to come out, and he's still asking God for that. So you see, God's plan or God's way in granting help has also been mentioned in the Quran, although this surah just refers to the fact that we ask help from Him. But in some of the other areas in the Quran, it has been made amply clear that help will arrive once we have done our part. If we have not done our part, God is not interested, because He has made certain laws in this universe which are governed by those laws. And if we don't follow those laws or those particular guidelines, nothing is going to happen. So that is another point that of course we need to understand. And so, do we have any other one who would like to share an opinion regarding this fact that verse 4 is not against seeking help from God, or the fact that we ask a friend's help? Anyone else?
I agree with what everyone else has said. That it's His way of giving me help.
And therefore, but what about the fact when we go to we go to a person, for example, there are so many people in this world, we start asking those people, the peers and the fakirs and people who have actually died, and we go to their shrines and we pray to them and we tell them, ask them, oh, please pray on our behalf to God or grant us our wish. So would that be crossing limits or would that be okay? I mean, let me rephrase my question. So there's one thing that you do your best and you pray to God and you ask for His help, and there's another thing that you knock at the doors of someone else and ask that particular person. He could be a saint, he could be a very, very respectful personality, and you ask that person, oh, that please grant us our wish, and because you have a very special status with God, and maybe God is going to listen to you much more than He's going to listen to me, and in fact, on behalf of God, you are going to grant my wish. So would that be okay?
I don't think so.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it would.
So that would be, why would that not be okay?
Because, like, they're dead. And, like, I don't know how they can help grant your wish.
So they are dead and they cannot grant your wish. But you see, there are so many people in this world who actually pray to the dead, and they think that dead people, especially if they are saints, they are very pious people in the past, they have these powers to grant your wishes. And maybe you're not exposed to such people, but I can assure you there are so many people in this world who even today, let me tell you, they're among Muslims. For example, there are so many Muslims who think that the Prophet Muhammad, if we supplicate to him and we ask him that please forgive us, so he'll win this forgiveness from God. Then we have Christians who think that if we just believe in Jesus, that he crucified himself, and therefore it was like offering sacrifice for the rest of mankind, and that would be enough for us to seek God's favor and His sacrifice, His help vis-a-vis salvation in the hereafter. So you see, there is it's just not something which is uncommon in this world. There are so many people, like as I said, amongst Muslims, amongst other religions, who actually rely not on God in granting them their wishes or granting them salvation, but in some other revered personality, including prophets of God, including saints. So my question is that okay, or do you think that this would be crossing the limits?
That's crossing the limits in my opinion, because you should only ask for help from Allah, because He's the only one who can grant your wishes, not someone who is either in Jannah or hell.
Okay.
That's how.
Okay, so you think that would be crossing limits because this is one of the attributes of God. Only He grants wishes, only He helps us, and if we bring some intermediary, someone in between us and God, this would of course be crossing the limits. And by the way, this is what Quran calls polytheism. Polytheism is not just that you believe in idolatry or you believe in a lot of other deities or other idols. So one of the manifestations of polytheism is that you grant the same power which God has to some other personality. As I said, that seeking help is something that only God can do. So for example, even if people say, Ya Muhammad, help us, or Ya Ali, help us, this would be against what God has actually intended for us, because no one other than God is there to help you. So if you invoke any personality other than God for something which is reserved for God, assigning the same powers which God has to some other being, and that is what we cannot do, because as I said, this is what God's concept is regarding polytheism, or ascribing some other partners to Him. So that's very good. Thank you very much for that. I think that really was a good eye opener with you. Okay, and the last question, my dear viewers and my friends, would be that verse 5 says, Ihdina Siratal Mustaqim, and guide us to the straight path. I mean, we pray, Ihdina Siratal Mustaqim. So, considering the fact that this is the first surah of the Quran, and people actually, when this surah was revealed, they wanted themselves to be guided. They were at crossroads, as the surah clearly tells us that the people of the book before them had lost their original guidance. The Jews had lost, of course, their own scriptures as far as the original language is concerned. They were the primary forerunners to the Quran, so to speak. So when someone in the times of the Prophet said, "Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim," guide us to the straight path. So the question is that did God answer this wish? And if He did, how did He do that? I mean, what was the means that He adopted? And I asked God in the Quran, just imagine this scenario, that I'm standing at a crossroads, I've lost guidance because the original words were not preserved of the previous book. And I say, Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, God, I want some fresh guidance because the previous guidance was lost upon people. And lo and behold, I have something for me. It seems as if God has guided me. Pay special attention to the fact that Surah Al-Fatiha is the first surah of the Quran. So in this first surah, when you ask for guidance, how do you think that God responded to this? Or did He not respond to it?
I think He responds to it indirectly.
Right? Why?
Yeah, so
how?
Like previously how we were talking about being advised by a friend, that information could be given by God through the friend. You get what I mean? So it could come in the form of a person or a circumstance or something out of coincidence.
Okay, well that you see what we are asking is for divine guidance. Here, Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim is not just the help that you just talked about. For example, you went to a friend and you said, I need your advice. Here, the word Ihdina Sirat means that God, we've lost our previous guidance. Please give us some fresh guidance. And here, guidance actually refers to divine guidance.
The guidance could also be, that the divine guidance you're talking about could be given through the heart. Like, you could be reminded of being grateful, of thinking about God. I initially thought it would be books, but since now they're not sent down, it would be from the inside.
No, remember that we are talking about a person who was standing in the times of the Prophet. So imagine yourself there. Transport yourself back in history, 14 centuries ago. You're standing and praying to God. God, we have lost some of the previous scriptures. We don't have the original words. I need some fresh guidance. Please give us some fresh guidance, which is divine guidance. And what did God do?
Sent down a prophet.
Send down?
Sent down Prophet Muhammad.
You're very close. And what did?
And the book, Quran.
That's it. That's the answer. So you see, Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim was that God, we have lost the previous guidance. The Torah was there, the Injil was there, the Psalms or the Zabur were there, but they exist in the original language. We just have these translations, and those too have been corrupted and interpolated. And God, standing in this point of time, we need a fresh guidance. So the answer that God gave to this was that He revealed the rest of the Quran. Remember, this Quran, the Surah Al-Fatiha is the first surah of the Quran. So there are 114 surahs of the Quran. So you can easily say that the rest of those surahs were actually God's act of providing guidance. So you said, guide us, God, and what God did was He started giving guidance to the people who stood in there in the time of the Prophet by sending down the Quran in installments, and once those installments were complete, it was compiled afresh. So that, if you've just given the right answer. So you see, Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim was a prayer that we made, and the rest of the Quran is an answer, is God's response to that prayer, which again is something which leads us back to the first verse that we studied. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. So we thank God for His mercy, for His blessings, and one of the biggest blessings God has given us is the Quran, is divine guidance. And it's not just for us, it's for every person in mankind, for all humankind, because all humankind deserved divine guidance from God. And before the Quran, that was provided, but it never sustained. It got lost over a period of time. The words got changed. The words were not preserved. And here we knew there was a prophet who was the last prophet of God. On him the institution of prophethood would be terminating. So this prayer was answered in a very lavish way. And as I said, it again brings us back to the opening sentence of the verse that we spontaneously say, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. God, we prayed to you to give us guidance, and lo and behold, you gave us a new guidance in the form of the Quran that is preserved, and that provides us with so many things that we were missing. So we thank you for that once again. So you see how the surah is interconnected and intertwined. The themes in a Quranic surah, they refer to what has already been mentioned. So this gives you another picture of the Quran, that the Quran is a very coherent book. It's a book in which emotions, the way they are expressed, it's such a, it's such a revealing experience, as if you're talking to God. On the one hand, you were just talking to Him, and on the other hand, you just got an answer to that. So when you study the Quran, when you read the Quran, inshallah, we'll be reading more portions in the coming sessions. Imagine yourself that you have to set up that living relationship with the book of God. Now, the next time you're standing in the prayer and reading Surah Al-Fatiha in every rakat, now just imagine this exercise that we have gone through today, because Surah Al-Fatiha is something that you're going to encounter every day. So just don't skip over it. Reflect on all the deep meanings that we have tried to understand. Reflect on the word alhamd, gratitude. Reflect on the word mercy. Reflect on the word that He is the master of the day of judgment. As we just said, that He is going to compensate for any problem that we are facing today. And He is a person who has guided us in our intellectual journey as well, because there are so many intellectual questions which cannot be answered unless we have God's guidance. How do we know there is a God? Why should there be a hereafter? Why should we believe in the Prophet? What is the Quran? So all these questions have been answered to satisfy our intellect. And then in the last portion of the surah, it says that God, you have to bless us, not like those people who before us had gone astray. And the reference here is in particular to the people of the book, because they had gone astray and they were the ones who had angered God by a lot of things. If you read the previous scriptures, you find them that they angered actually God through some of their demands, by actually being very, very harsh to their own prophets. There are examples in which prophets of God were actually they were beheaded. So there are a lot of things which happened in the previous times, and here we have a fresh guidance, a prayer for fresh guidance, and at the same time this prayer that God, once you set us on the right path, please bless us as well, so that we are able to enjoy your favors not only in this world but also have a comprehension for the hereafter. So this was a small introduction, an introductory reading to the Surah Al-Fatiha, and the purpose is because you read it every day. Please, whenever you do read the next time in Surah in the prayer, let it speak for itself, and let this connection which you have maybe gained today benefit you. So before I end, is there anything that any one of you would like to share or express, or in any way would like to contribute to the discussion that we had? So any one of you or any suggestion that you would be having, that would be welcome, and if it's not the case, then we'll end the discussion here. Okay, it seems like we have done enough for today. So thank you very much for your participation. It was wonderful. I enjoyed a lot, and to be honest, I learned a lot as well from you. And I hope that we mutually learn from one another. We are able to discuss these points, and always remember there is no such thing as a taboo question. You can ask everything, you can think of everything, and above all, start your mental process of reflecting on the Quran, of deliberating on the Quran, so that you can have a living relationship with the Quran. So thank you very much. See you next Sunday, same time, same place. Khuda Hafiz.